When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 49, Moral Devastation, Questionable Choices, Shame Untangled, and Unimaginable Outcomes. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Jennifer Slay. Jennifer is a dynamic motivational speaker, certified life coach, therapist, author, and trainer in the field of social work. She was chosen as one of the recipients of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 for her community work and as one of Canada's Women of Confidence in the national publication Chatelaine magazine. Jennifer currently owns a private practice where she provides psychotherapeutic services and coaching to individuals primarily experiencing feelings of depression, anxiety, and/or immobility. She is an educator and has created workshops, online programs, and delivered various speeches that support and encourage people to overcome fear to reach their full potential. Her latest endeavors have been creating educational platforms through All Women Lead workshops, anti-racism training through shifting perspectives, and co-produced an award-winning TV show on Rogers TV called Melanated View. As of the fall of 2021, Jennifer has been hosting the local community television show What's Up London. Jennifer lives by the motto, "To whom much is given, much is required." And she is prepared to share and grow with others. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Salima. I'm very excited to be here.
My goodness, you're not just excited. I'm excited. I'm thrilled to have you on the show today. And I am certainly grateful for your willingness to tell your story today. It feels encouraging for me when I'm met with guests like yourself who allow me to draw from the strength, to draw from support and inspiration from these stories that are shared, especially here on this platform. And so it's really important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma. And so, Jennifer, in case that you're still wondering, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about this podcast. This podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And something that we know is that no matter the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which tends to remain tucked away. And so this platform, I guess that's my hope, is going to serve in a way, or is serving in a way, to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, my hopeful mission is for you and I to stand call and encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservations for expressing. And of course, I'm bringing forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. Jennifer, what are your thoughts when you hear the phrase the mental beauty rethink?
I thought of that, and it's peacefulness. Like I just think of looking at water, because for me, when I look at a big body of water, it's just complete peace. And so when I think of mental beauty, I think of complete peace.
Mm, I like that. Complete peace, stillness.
Hmm.
That's a really incredible insight. It's such a simple and beautiful articulation. It's a really great perspective.
When you're looking at trying to overcome certain adversities in your life, sometimes it's the simplest strategies that work best.
I hear that. It's the simplest strategies that work. Like, hey, let's take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well put. Lots of food for thought with the simplicity. I love it.
Hmm.
Okay. Jennifer, I'm ready to get started. Are you?
I'm ready.
Okay, my dear. Jennifer, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
Hypocrite, lover of people, shame.
Hmm,
That would be the headline.
that's your headline. Hypocrite, lover of people, shame. Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell me where this comes from? You say it with such boldness, right? So where does this come from?
Well, I say it with boldness now. Had you talked to me about 7 years ago, it would be a different story. But about 7 years ago now, I had gone through very emotional divorce, which I guess most divorces are. But
Mhm,
I had found myself in a situation, or I had put myself in a situation where I had had an affair. And my ex husband and I, we did try working through things, but given some history that had gone on with him and the stuff that was going on with me, we just decided, no, this wasn't going to work. And
mhm,
the consequences that happened with
mhm,
that, with
mhm.
regards to children and your own mental health and mental wellness, it was really, really hard, a really difficult time. Yeah.
Right. Wow, that title is packed with so much.
Hmm.
And I know that there's more that comes from this opening. So, without further ado, tell us more about your untold story. Tell us about the who's, the what's, the when's, the where's.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give some context and some details.
Yeah.
Have you ever been shocked by something, like just completely shocked that it
Yeah.
took your breath away and you just
Yeah.
didn't know what to do next? So that's what happened with me. I was married, had two small children and a child from a previous relationship, and we were living life and it was good. And I, like a lot of women and men, found an email. I found an email on the computer, and it was an inappropriate email,
Mhm,
with
mhm,
my husband and another person,
mhm.
and it devastated me, like took the air out of my lungs. Because I had no idea there was anything wrong in my marriage. No
Right.
clue. And so then we decided we would try and work through things, and we did so. At least I thought we did. And then a few years
Mhm, mhm,
later, I found myself the same predicament, but this time I was the one having the affair.
mm.
Honestly, Salima, it felt like an addiction almost, because I knew it was wrong. I knew I had to stop, but for some reason I couldn't. And I know that might sound like a cop out for a lot of people listening, but honestly, that is how it felt at that time.
Well, there's like an adrenaline rush that goes with it. And I mean, I'm no couples therapist expert, but what I do know that I've come across from people from time to time is that, and you and I may have spoken about it in a private conversation as well, is that when we take these big leaps that are completely foreign to our character, there's usually some sort of an unmet need that's going on in the background. Would you say that that would have been true for you as well?
Yes, I would absolutely say that. It was one of those situations where the grass looked greener, because we were just going through so many financial difficulties,
Mhm.
and just life was hard. And again,
Mhm.
like I talk about this and it's like, I don't want anyone to think I'm giving excuses because I completely take responsibility for my actions and all of
Mhm.
that. But at that time, it
Mhm.
just looked like the grass was greener. And when I was with
Mhm.
this other gentleman, it was like time stopped and I could just enjoy and be happy and
Mhm.
breathe, like not
Mhm.
have to
Mhm.
worry
Mhm.
about stuff for the brief amount of time that we were together.
And so this addiction, did you feel like for a while it was a I mean, at what point was it not a secret?
Oh, it was a secret for the whole time. When it was over, that's when it came out.
Okay.
So when it was
Mhm.
over and emails were found between the two of us, and that's
Mhm.
when I decided, okay, I need to tell my husband at that time about what had
Mhm.
happened. And so instead of trying to hide it and create stories and all of that, I
Mhm.
said, you know what,
Mhm.
just come clean and let's try and get through this.
Mhm. So what was that like for you to come clean, to come forward and be that vulnerable and admit to here's what happened. Here's what's been happening.
Salima, it was scary as hell,
Mm,
but at the
mhm.
same time, so freeing. Because it was like,
Yeah.
okay, so this is done now. It's over. Now we can just figure out what the next steps are. Everything's out in the open. And the thing is, I felt very hypocritical because at the same time, I was very involved in my church and I just had these conflicting, like, if you were a good Christian, then you wouldn't have been doing this. If you were, and just that inner critic got so loud. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
Tell me more about this inner critic. I'm interested.
Well, the inner critic that we all have, it's
Mhm.
really there to try and protect you from harm, but sometimes it can get really loud and tell you about all the things that you're doing wrong and
Mhm.
maybe even exacerbate the things that you're doing wrong to a level that's not necessarily true.
Was that true for you?
Yes. Like I
Yeah.
felt like I was the worst person in the world. I was the most
Mm,
hypocritical person in the world. There could never be anyone more evil than me. Like it
mm.
just that's how it felt.
Wow.
And then it's like, okay, Jen, like that's a bit dramatic. Like really,
But you
you're
didn't
not.
think that you were dramatic at the time, like, you actually truly,
No.
like,
And I
felt
really
it.
felt that way. And so, it was like I had to get to a point and I got through that point through therapy and just some really amazing good friends that I
Mhm,
am a good person. I just made some real bad choices.
mhm, mhm,
Right?
mhm, mhm. And so tie this back to your headline because I know it's very much related. So you said hypocrite, lover of people, and shame. So
Mhm.
tell me more about how that all fits together for you.
Well, a hypocrite because I'm in church and I'm supposed to
Mhm,
be
mhm,
this morally high standing
mhm.
person. So
Right.
I'm feeling very hypocritical living this double life. A lover of people because I would give my left arm to try and help somebody. I remember, Salim, it's funny, when I was about 6 years old, I remember watching, those UNICEF infomercials on TV
Right?
where they show
Yes.
the children in Africa, Ethiopia. So I would watch that, and I remember this as clear as day. I would kneel on my bed and I'd pray, please, please, God, help these children. Please, please, God, one day let me be able to help. And so I've always just had a heart to help people, right? So I
Mhm, mhm,
love people. I believe in people's potential. The shame part is you're doing good, but you're doing bad. And how can you do both
mhm.
at the same time?
Right,
Right. And so I felt very shameful for that. So that's
right.
how that headline kind of plays out.
That's how it all plays out in the details.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm curious about what occurred for you to get to the place of having that affair dissolve? Like, at what point did you realize that this is not what I want to be doing? Or did it just fizzle out? Or was there something that got you to shift from where you were to like moving forward from that?
Well, it did fizzle out. It was fizzling
Mhm,
out. But then, like I said, emails were found because he had been married, I was married. And so
mhm,
his wife actually found and
mhm.
confronted us and all of those things. So it was just unraveling. Everything was unraveling. So that's what helped it to end.
So the truth caught up to all of you.
The truth caught up to all of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so then you made that conscious choice, like, okay, I'm going to now come clean to my husband, and I'm going to let him in on what's been going on here.
Yeah. Because if I didn't, somebody else was going to. Right.
Right.
So he needs to hear this from me.
Right. So what was his reaction like?
He was in disbelief because he couldn't believe it. He's like, how could you do something like that? He just couldn't believe
He
that,
was
like,
dumbfounded.
you really?
Like he just couldn't fathom, like, how does that make sense?
He really was. He really was. And so
Right.
that shock and everything wore off. I know one time he said to me afterwards when things had calmed down, he said, Jen, I know that you wouldn't have done something like that if I hadn't have done what I did a few years ago. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's true or not, but I know that's what
Right.
he carries with him. That's how maybe he's able to understand everything. I don't know.
Well, he's created some sort of meaning for himself, for him to sort of
Hmm.
put balance and perspective of it's not a tit for tat necessarily, but at the same time, there was some sort of a imbalance that was going
Hmm.
on in the background, and highlighting that and being able to acknowledge that, I'm sure that must have, whether or not it fully resonated with you, I'm sure it made you feel like validated or heard in some way.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I
I
guess.
guess it's what was I was picking up on, but I'm
Hmm.
not part of the story. What do I know? Right. And so at any point, even though there was all this stuff that was happening, was there like a part of you that also felt hurt, even though this affair was going on or when the affair was coming to a close?
I was hurt because I had hurt myself in doing
Mm,
this. I had hurt my family. I had played a part in hurting his family. And so there was that. And then the fallout afterwards when we separated. And I remember driving one day and just thinking, all of the pressures that are in my life, if I turn the wheel just a little bit, I could just end everything. And that's when I really,
you had that thought, eh?
I had the thought. And the thing is, I'm like a really happy person,
Yes.
genuinely a happy. So I knew when I had that thought, something's up.
Hmm.
Something's up. You've got to get more help than just talking to my girlfriends and my sister, right? And so I got support from a psychologist and
Hmm.
worked through some of the stuff. But I often say Tina Turner is who saved me because,
Yeah.
yeah, I was watching a biography on her and of the abuse that she had gone through in terms of financial, emotional, physical. And
Hmm.
the announcer said these 10 or 12 words that just resonated with me. And at the age of 44, Tina Turner started over again.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, if she could do that so publicly in my little world, so can I. Like it just, when a light bulb goes off?
Yeah. Like, well, if she can, so can I. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what got things really going for me to get help, support, build myself back up. And I made a promise that
Hmm.
I would help others for the
Hmm.
rest of my career. I would help others through these really difficult times in their lives.
Yeah. It sounds like you really took in and connected with the lessons and knowledge that came from this experience and the multi levels of this experience. And you decided to figure out, what can I do with this? How can I give back? How can I take this experience, this unique thing that I've experienced, and how difficult and tumultuous it would have been, and say, how can I be of service to someone else? That's very encouraging.
One of the things that I recall from that time is just that feeling of selfishness. Like I was just
Hmm.
totally consumed in wanting to make myself feel good,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so channeling that in a more healthy way is what I've been
Hmm.
able to do.
Yeah. Just like how mental health has so many stigmas of its own, I often find that when we talk to people about self care, people tell me, oh, well, that's like very selfish. And
Mm.
I often tell people, do you know what the definition of self care is? Is to, it's to take care of oneself first.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So selfish is the negative connotation that's associated with it, that comes with it. And being selfish means to take care of oneself first, which is self-care, right? So
Yeah.
they go hand in hand. But
Yeah.
sometimes we need to reframe what we're considering as part of that package, right? So
Yeah.
you said that you had these feelings of selfishness and then you needed to rechannel it. What was that like?
Well, I just want to say one thing here. When you don't take care of yourself, you end up making decisions that probably aren't best for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's how we can sometimes get ourselves into these really sticky situations.
Mm-hmm.
But I firmly believe that if we take care of ourselves intentionally and put ourselves first, then our mind is more clear to be able to make really good decisions for ourselves and those around us and the people that we love.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I live by that and I share that with my clients on a regular basis too.
Hmm.
And so I think what you're telling me is that you tuned into a bit more compassion for yourself and really took time to check in with yourself. So, what is good for me? What do I need right now? That's what I'm hearing you
Yeah.
tell me.
Yeah. Because honestly, if you had at that time, if you had said, okay, so Jen, what are the things that you like to do? I wouldn't have
Hmm.
been able to sit and tell you anything. I'd have to sit there and think about it because I had been giving, and not
Mm,
taking care of myself. And then when I wanted to feel good, I made some really bad choices, right? And it affected a lot of people. So when I started taking care of me, my mind could be more clear to think, okay, so how can I give back? How can I support others?
right. So you spread yourself so thin initially, and then you indulged,
Hmm.
right? That was the choice, was to indulge.
Yeah.
And then when you started to take care of yourself, it shifted how all the choices worked out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it shifted your choices and the patterns, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So, Jennifer, when people come to see me for therapy, people tend to be in, one of three places. Some people are getting started, some people are right in the thick of things, like right in the middle, and some people are looking back. And some people are looking back in the sense like they're trying to connect with something so they can have some closure, or they're reminiscing, or they want to learn some lessons so that they can move on to the next chapter of their life. What
Hmm.
part of the journey would you say that you're in? Would you say that you are getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
It's funny. I would say all three. And what I mean by that is every day is a new start. Every day is a new start to try a new idea, get creative with something, do something new. In the middle, because we're always working on what we had started the day before or the week before or
Mhm.
whatever. And then looking back is more remembering the pain, not sitting in that, but remembering it so that I don't repeat it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, there's no timeline for you because you've described it as to how it works for you in terms of a beginning, a middle, and looking back. I know you mentioned that you remind yourself of the pain so that you don't repeat it. But I guess the question I want to ask you is, what do you want to remember about the process of your healing journey so far?
That each one of us is incredibly resilient and strong. Every single one of us. And I'm a psychotherapist as well. And that's something that I remind my clients of because
Hmm.
I remember of that deep despair that
Hmm.
I was in during that time and thinking, how the hell am I ever going to get out of this? How am I
Hmm.
ever going to feel good again? And I did it.
Yeah.
Obviously, not by myself. I created a support system, but
Hmm.
I was able to get through it and I was able
Hmm.
to thrive and do better than I ever did before. Right. And
Hmm.
so if I can, just like if Tina Turner can,
Right.
so can everybody else. And that's something
Right.
that I'm constantly reminding myself of.
That's so cool. Okay, that's a really nice way of putting it. And it is true. There is resilience in each one of us. There is strength in each one of
Hmm.
us. But it's about
Hmm.
whether or not we can slow our process down enough to be able to tap into it and recognize that it's there, get acquainted with it, and then work from there.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so, what would you say that you're grateful for with encountering this journey of your untold story?
What am I grateful for? I'm so grateful for
Yeah.
so many things.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for opportunities. Like I'm just
Hmm.
grateful for opportunities to do good despite having done bad.
Hmm.
Right? So I think being mindful of that allows me to have hope because we know at that time I had been diagnosed with depression, a situational depression,
Hmm.
and we know depression is a lot of hopelessness. And so for
Mhm.
me, having that hope and understanding there's always going to be opportunities to move forward, no matter what you're going
Mhm.
through. I think having that knowledge, I'm very grateful for.
Mm. Yes, that you can get through.
Hmm.
And that's huge. You know,
Yeah.
a few minutes ago, earlier in our chat, you told me about this realization that you had. We were talking about the hypocrite and how
Hmm.
hypocritical you were, and that inner critic, how loud it became. You mentioned how, like, you described yourself as feeling or thinking that you were this worst person in the world and you were like the most evil. And then I know that you said, like, with some support, you were able to sort of tap into a reframe and recognize that you could separate some things. And so you could be a good person who made a not so good decision or a not so good choice.
Hmm.
What did it take for you to get to that place?
As I told the story to my closest girlfriends and my sister
Hmm.
and my therapist, I thought the reaction was going to be, "Oh my God, Jen. Oh my gosh, that is horrible." And
Hmm.
that was not the reaction at all. It
Hmm.
was like, "Okay, yeah, all right,
Hmm.
well, Jen, that's not great, but it's okay. You're going to be okay. It's going to be fine."
So it's kind of like they gave you permission to be imperfect.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe I had put myself on this pedestal that I'm supposed to be a certain way. I'm
Uh-huh.
supposed to act a certain way, that the thought of dropping from that pedestal for my closest friends and family was devastating for me. But then when I actually told them, it was like, okay, well, there are worse things. It's like,
Hmm.
what? Really? Are you
Hmm.
serious?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
That's really interesting, right? Like, I mean, so you had the self pedestal that you were on,
Hmm.
and you conditioned yourself to show up perfectly, and then you had to step down because of choices you made, and then you
Hmm.
realized that no one really had that same view of you in the way that you had of yourself, and they could be kinder to you than you were being to yourself,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
could be more accepting to you than you could accept yourself. But it
Hmm.
seems like that helped you pivot and that you could accept imperfection.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And not be as judgmental. I've never
Mhm.
been judgmental of clients and stuff like that.
No, but for yourself, like all the self judgment.
The self judgment and
So
everything.
you were
Yeah.
able to let go of self judgment.
Yeah.
That's very much adopting that whole mindful approach, right? Because mindfulness requires a certain quality of attention. And part of it is also, it's not about judging something or being lost in those judgments or thinking that something has to be good or bad or right or wrong.
Mhm.
It seems like you were so engrossed in it, but the moment you were able to take a step back and take in the fuller picture, you could separate yourself from the emotion of it.
And you know what? That's a good analogy right there, is just be able to step back and look at
The whole
picture,
picture.
the whole
Right.
picture
Hmm.
from a different lens.
Right. And you're validating the whole story, right? Like, I'm a good person and I made a not so good choice. And what am I going to do with it now? So here's what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
So then
Yeah.
you ran with it. You're like, all right, I'm going to take accountability for my actions. I'm going to own up to things. I'm going to do what needs to be done. And you know what? And now I'm going to use these lessons and these learnings and I'm going to share or contribute to society to help others get to where they need to go.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Like, incredibly amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so I know that we've talked a little bit, we've dabbled in a little bit about how your mental health has been affected, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how this untold story about this affair and this dual affair, both your side and your husband's
Hmm.
side, just how that affected your mental health. Like, I know that you started to tell me that, you were diagnosed with
Hmm.
situational depression and did share a lot of some of the deep feelings that you felt, but I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about that impact.
Yeah. Well, anytime something like that happens where there's a betrayal of trust, for me, anyways, it fed into my insecurities because, we all have certain
Mhm.
insecurities. It
Mhm.
fed into that.
So if it fed into your insecurities, what would that look like afterwards?
So questioning myself. Like,
Mm,
I would think that I'm a fairly confident person and always have been. But then during that time, I would question everything about myself. Like, I
okay.
questioned how I looked. I questioned how I acted. I questioned who really cared about me. Questioned, are they being truthful with me? Just question, question, question. And I wasn't like that before. And it was like this constant record player, that inner critic in my head constantly going on. And it was exhausting. And I had to keep, for me, I wanted to keep up appearances. So when I left my house, nobody would know that something was going on. And when I got home, I just sunk. Like, I made sure my kids were fed, but there's some guilt with that too, because during that time, emotionally, I just was not there for them.
Right.
I just wasn't there for them, and I wasn't there for myself. And so that's how that came out for me. And I think it was hard not being able to just, or not feeling like I could just let everybody know how I was feeling, because I was so embarrassed and I was so scared that once people heard the story, I was going to be judged really harshly. And I think the reason I'm telling the story now is because I don't care. It's like, you're going to think what you want to think of me. And that's okay. That is okay, because I know who I am.
Right. It doesn't define you and all of you. And if that's what a person is going to get from hearing your story today, wow. Right. There's a lot to be said about that, because you as an entire person, you've done so many great things, and you know so many great things, and you have so many skills, and there's so much that you offer to people on a regular basis. But you and I and every other person, we have imperfections, so we need to embrace them. I mean, it's one thing to be complacent about it, but your intention was never to be hurtful or harmful or spiteful to anyone. The focus was about you and things you were lacking in processing or not processing, or all of those experiences. It just got entangled. You got entangled in it.
And so you're right. The intention was never to hurt anybody. That was not the intention, but that was the impact. And so, you do have to live with that and accept that. Like, I will forever have to live with the fact that I was part of some other person's hurt, right? Probably one of the most hurtful times in their life. And that doesn't feel good. Right. So I've done what I can, like, I've apologized and all of those kinds of things to make amends so that I can move forward and do what I do with a clear conscience.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you experience guilt, right? Because it's like, crap, I did something really bad. This was a poor choice, or however it is. And then you take ownership and responsibility for it. It manifests as shame when you're like, well, I am crappy. Not like I did this crappy thing. I am the crappy thing, right? So I'm glad that you were able to process things and that you were able to get help and insight and get some validation on a reality check of like, what really happened. Like, so it's not being complacent and saying, this was fine, I can move on with life, but you took ownership of what you needed to take ownership for. And you held yourself responsible and accountable. Would you feel like that's true for you?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
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 And so how else were you affected? Was there any like physical manifestations? Did you have any like other types of self-deprecating thoughts or anything like that come up for you?
Yeah. So I carry my stress in my neck. So my neck was constantly tight. My skin, I'm blessed with beautiful skin. And my skin was just breaking up with, those pimples underneath the skin that hurt.
Yes.
My face was breaking out with those. When I'm extremely stressed, I have a twitch on my eye. And so that was constantly happening. And so I knew like something's wrong. Like, I didn't feel good. My stomach constantly in knots. Because when you live in fear, then you're always looking around, waiting for the next shoe to drop. What's going to happen next? Who's going to find out? Who's going to hate me? There's all of that crap that many of us put ourselves through, that, thank God, I don't have anymore. So
Right. So the living in fear was a big one too. It like took over, it consumed you. Wow.
Because, when you build up a certain reputation, as we know, when we see famous people all the time, it takes one thing for their reputation to be completely tarnished. Right. And so that's what I was scared of. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to think this of me. Oh my gosh, I've done all of these things. And now this is what I'm going to be remembered for. Like, really, nobody cares. Like, really and truly, nobody cares. But for some reason, I built myself up in my head to think that everyone is going to be talking about me. And again, nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being in a situation like I kept thinking, well, I made such a mistake. What the heck was I thinking? And I was beating myself up for it. And I don't know if it was a friend or it was a close person to me. And they said, "You're not that famous." And they said, you're not that famous, Selena. I mean, why do you think that people are going to care so much? Like, who are you?
Uh-huh.
That people are going to care.
Exactly.
And I looked
Exactly.
at them and I was like, oh, it was one of those. I'm like, oh, okay. So basically you're telling me that I'm not special. And then I was kidding. I'm just kidding. But that's a whole different story. But the eye-opening thing was, remember you talked about that self-pedestal? So sometimes we put
Mhm.
ourselves on these seats and we're feeding ourselves these narratives and telling ourselves these stories about how things are and
Yeah.
how they're going down. But we're not in check with reality. We're not there to actually see that that's not the view, that's not the appearance that other people have.
Yeah.
We didn't check out the facts, right? And when we don't do that, we can really get sucked into these really difficult spirals and cycles like some of the ones that you've described today. That can really put a big toll on our mental well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of
Mhm.
stress. A lot of stress. And when your brain is stressed, it's hard to think clearly. It's hard to
Right.
make good decisions for yourself, and it's hard to take care of yourself. All of those things.
Mhm.
The brain is like, it takes care of everything, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you've got to be good to it. You
Yeah.
have to be good to it.
It's simple things like, "Hey, I need sleep."
Yeah. Those foundational things.
Yeah, like brain rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much screen time am I actually using? And maybe I need to do less. Or what happens if I was to close my eyes? Or what happens if I'm going to gaze out the window and just look at the birds or the trees and see what's going on out there?
Mhm.
And if we don't take time to do those things, or however it would look, to rest our brain and to rest our mind,
Yeah.
sometimes we just think about it, like even here being in the pandemic and working in our offices and being virtual and doing all sorts of things, sometimes it gets draining and you think, oh, how am I going to manage the next 1 or 2 hours? But if you get up from your desk and you walk around for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, just doing something, making a coffee even, you
Mhm.
already feel, oh, I think I have more energy, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is about paying attention to your body. It's about paying attention to what your brain needs, paying attention to just your overall wellness and your needs, and paying attention to like what's good for me, what's good for me right now, what do
Mhm.
I need in this moment, what am I feeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you said that you carry all your stress in your neck. Do you notice if there are any other emotions that you experience very big, and then do you feel those big emotions in your neck also?
Anytime there's this tingling sensation and then a tightness, anytime I
Hmm.
start to feel that, then I know, okay, I have to stop whatever I'm doing and breathe and just
Mm-hmm.
breathe it out. As I said at the beginning of our talk today,
Mm-hmm.
the most simplistic things, right? So it's the deep breathing for me as well as journaling. Those and meditation. Those three
Mm-hmm.
things have really helped support me to be able to move through some difficult times in my life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I second that. Those are such amazing, simple, and effective strategies and tools,
Yeah.
right?
It's like
Absolutely.
downloading. Like when you journal, it's
Yeah.
like downloading stuff out of your brain.
Yeah. I always talk about it as a hack, right? It's like you're tricking your brain. You're letting it know, like, hey, I'm gonna like offload here and put you all in a book. And your brain gets a moment to go, oh, okay, I can release this. Because it knows
Mhm.
that you've got a place that you're keeping it. So if it wants to release it, you have a place to go back and review it,
Yeah.
right? So you really get to offload and download all of that from your brain. It is great. Small, simple strategies, some of
Mhm.
the most helpful tools. Absolutely. So, Jennifer, what is your key message to the listeners of the show? What do you want them to know?
The key message, whatever you're experiencing today
Mhm,
does not have to define your tomorrow.
mhm,
So if you're going through a difficult time today, you
mhm,
can get through it. Just believe that you can get through it. There's a lesson in whatever you're going through, right? There's a
mhm,
lesson to learn. Take that lesson and move forward. Don't beat yourself up.
mhm,
Don't let that inner critic get really loud and just no, okay, I can change this. Or if great things are happening, then relish in those great things, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
it's the negative things that we really hone in on a lot, right?
Yeah,
Well, we have this negativity bias. We focus on the
yeah,
negative more than we do
yeah,
the positive. That's just human nature.
yeah, yeah.
But don't allow that to define who you are.
Right. That's an important message. Don't let it define you. Right. That's a really great message. And you said something at the beginning. So whatever you are experiencing today doesn't have to define your tomorrow.
Something like
That's
that. Yep.
yeah. All right. So I know you talked about Tina Turner, so I don't know if there's anyone else, but I am curious about what would have been game changing for you in terms of your inspiration that's close to how you reflect on your untold story. So, in addition to Tina Turner, would there have been a quote or a book or a song or a person or an event, something that spoke to you that helped you pivot?
Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world."
Hmm.
And I take that to heart. And so that's what I am. I am the change that I want to see in the world.
Wow, that's wonderful. So you really embodied it.
Hmm. Took it right to heart.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's phenomenal. And so, what would be a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to?
Well, an organization that is there to support Black women is the Congress of Black Women. They provide support to women with regards to furthering their education, supporting them in raising their families by providing
Mhm.
different education and workshops and different things like that. Especially given the last couple of years after the George Floyd murder, it's really become more important to seek out that support. And so
Mhm.
the Congress of Black Women have been very helpful in doing that.
They really help to facilitate that for people.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And tell me about what social platforms you're findable on. If people want to connect with you, where could they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Those are my three favorite places to be.
Those are your three favorite places. What about like Twitter or YouTube or anywhere else, or just those three are your main?
Oh, you know what? YouTube. You're right. I've decided to start growing my YouTube, so it's fairly
Okay,
new to me. I'm just learning how to do that stuff.
that's okay. We got to start somewhere, right? So when you take on a new platforms, it's always going to start small, but that's okay.
But to have a conversation with me, it's LinkedIn or Instagram would be the best places.
Okay, good to know. Noted. And yeah, we have a show notes page for all of our guests. So we have one for you, or we will have one for you, and they'll be able to connect to all of your social handles. So that's fantastic. We've got that information of yours.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, guess what?
What? What? What?
You just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Truly, thank you for the opportunity
Mm,
because this isn't a story that I've shared publicly. Like there's few
mhm,
people that are aware of it, but having our conversation, even when we first started talking, I
mhm.
didn't I didn't think that this was the story I was going to share. So I
Right.
appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that in a very safe way.
Well, I'm glad that you felt safe. That's always important for me to hear and know about for my guests. And Jennifer, I just want to say how inspiring it has been to witness your story. Truly, you encountered a choice that led to an outcome that, while was wrapped up in layers of hurt, pain, grief, sadness, shame, you then connected to yourself. You disallowed yourself to be defined by it. You separated your worth from one choice that you learned from, and you took it all and turned it into something beautiful and inspiring, which is how you are truly giving back to others. You're helping them, you're guiding them, and you're leading other women to grow. So I can't thank you enough for this deep conversation and for all the daring and all the sharing.
No problem. Again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Amazing. And once again, Jennifer, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.